Okay, so today I want to quickly talk about the multiband dynamics inside Ableton and how it can be used for a lot of creative things that a lot of people tend to not use it for. People like to throw on OTT onto stuff, and that's dope. I mean, OTT sounds good, but there's so many more things that you can do with multiband dynamics, and I'm going to try and show you some cool stuff that you can do that you may not know is possible. Yeah, so I've got this little loop thing going. And I just want multiband dynamics to like beef up the kick drum in this. So we want to solo the low end here and try to encapsulate most of the kick drum. And you can use this as a compressor, which is what most people use it as. It's really good for that. But you can also use it as an upwards expander. So similar to how compression works, where it's like, if you say 1 to 2, it would be compressing by double the amount that it's going into the compressor, right? And the attack and release is just the envelope on those on that ratio. And so we have a fast attack here and a relatively slow release, maybe 300-ish, and we boost that in, and we have our maximum dB at -5 here. We can boost the low end of this kick as hard as we want, pretty much, into the low band here, and it's not really going to go past -5 dB. It will go back. It will go past for 30 milliseconds, and you can tweak that, just by making it shorter. But rel 30 is like decent, and the clicking isn't that noticeable. Like the distortion isn't that noticeable. But so let's unsolo everything. And look, before and after, the kick is a lot more punchy. Like that's cool, right? But let's say we want it to be like snappier too. We can bring up this thing that I was telling you about, the upwards expansion, and we can actually make it a gate. So it's pulling it down. So I think I was explaining this wrong. It's not upwards expansion. It's just upwards compression. And then this would be expansion, which is also known as a gate, which is pulling the signal down once it passes a certain threshold. So if we put that really close, to our ceiling here, once it's no longer hitting that compressor at like maximum volume, and as soon as it peaks below that, it's going to pull the signal as far as it can down as fast as possible with our 120.25 here, which is the lowest we can go. Without it, see, the sustain on the low end is a lot longer. If you use that, it gates it and makes it a lot more punchy. Versus not using it. The low end lingers a lot more. So if you want like a cleaner, tighter low end, doing this works really well and makes it so that, the kicks are hitting at -5 dB. Everything 202 hertz and below is going to hit at around -5 dB. Say, okay, this is cool, but maybe we want more like body and like room noise to everything. If we put this up and we slowly bring up the upwards compressor here, so it'll try to bring the quietest stuff louder in volume, which if you know anything about music production, that's what they tell you compression is. But in reality, what you're doing is making the loudest parts quieter. And then you go, okay, yeah, but it makes it louder, right? Well, compression is not really going to make something louder. It just makes it so that you remove headroom so that you can turn it louder afterwards. Um, and so if you use upwards compression, you kind of skip that turning up part, and you're just taking the quiet parts and making the quiet parts louder. So if we do that, the upwards compressor is really kind of dependent on the release. So the shorter your release times are and your attack times, the more aggressive it'll be. But this is super aggressive, and you probably don't want something like this. So we'll just turn it up until we have something we like. That's probably good. All right, so for the high end, depends on the vibe you're going for. For like high energy stuff, you probably want like this to be pretty energetic. Here's before. The difference is pretty huge. So, I mean, you have a lot of control over sounds using multiband dynamics here. And the cool thing about the amount knob here is this isn't a dry wet. This is like a ratio knob. The lower you have this, the ratios kind of change so that they're less aggressive and more subtle. So you can use this. It's similar to a dry wet. But if you dial in something that you like quite a bit soloed, and then you switch it over to the main mix, and you're hearing it in context, and you're like, "Ooh, maybe I overcooked it a little bit." You can pull back on this, maybe like 60%. Pretty cool. I'm going to show another example on like transient shaping with drums here. Okay, so here we've got a pretty fat kick. And I want to bend this to my will, basically. So somewhere around 120 is like where the subbiness hits, and I want this to act pretty quickly. And I want the release to be long, because I basically want to use this as like an envelope shaper. So we'll get probably -3 dB in, because that's like the sweet spot for sub here, maybe -5. And we'll boost that in, and we'll turn the ratio all the way down to infinity, right? And now, the longer we make this release, the more it's going to keep it at this lower volume here. So let's say we want it to be like the envelope for the sub, we want it to be even shorter. So we'll bring it -10. And we'll increase the release here. And let's say we can go even further, maybe -15. And then this attack is going to be how much it's going to let through before it starts to bring it down to -15 here. I'll probably go 300. So we've kind of tamed that there. And if we want to pull this out even more, we could do this trick I talked about earlier with the expansion. So now we want like this mid part here to be like way more punchy. So we'll do another one of these. Do maybe 45 milliseconds, and then we'll boost it. I'm just tweaking it. It's all about finding a nice balance of what you want here. So the main thing is messing with the output after you dial in what you want. So normally -15 on a kick might be good. We'll boost this in. Okay, maybe -15 might be too much. We'll do 38. And we want a really quick attack. Really quick attack. Went from this to this in a couple minutes. I think we should maybe add some sort of clipper at the end here. We'll use digital clip. So we've essentially taken one of our kicks and changed it to a completely different kick with one device, with the multiband dynamics and a clipper. I mean, the clipper is unnecessary, but this is just to shave off the peaks because it is going over 0 dB, but it sounds fine, so we don't have to really worry about it. And basically, there are so many things that you can do with this multiband dynamics. It's extremely powerful. I implore you to not just use the OTT because and really if we want to deep dive on this and the explanation of how compression and these ratios work, I will gladly make a video about it if people actually care and want that. But I'm going to show you another example now on some sort of snare, on a snare sound. So this is cool. I have a preset that I have called the aesthetically pleasing snare compression preset, which I'll swap out the camel fat with a hard clip saturator here. So this is the before. This is after. Now this makes it so if you see with the fast attack, fast release, this keeps the high end like very steady. Like it stays the same volume for a very long time. Because without it, you hear there's more of an envelope, more of a transient. This keeps it like the same volume, almost like a noise blast, and then cuts off. Which could be useful for the genre that you're doing. Now, if we see relatively fast attack, longer release, this will be more of a transient, right? So we can emphasize this even more. If we want this to be more of a block, we can make the release even shorter. We'll make this 20, and then we'll maybe make this 50. This will keep it as more of a block. And the harder we boost into it, the more of a block it'll be. But you don't always want that sound. Pressing the little on-off button is a good way to figure out if your gain staging is correct. And you want to hear what it sounds like before you're doing the compression. And then when you turn it back on, it allows you to quickly tell if whether or not your volume changes are going to be all out of whack. So you want to keep that, like, the relationship between the bands a similar volume, unless you want a completely different sounding snare, which is, you know, sometimes you want that. So we've turned like a nice snare. I mean, it's definitely dynamic. Depends what you want. Definitely a nice dynamic snare into a very bricky, blocky, noisy snare. And we can make this super versatile. Could be used on a lot of different things. Very good for drums. Very good for synths, buses. It's used to a lot of times I'll have something on the a group, and I want all the volumes of the low end to be around or never pass -3 dB. And so I'll put a multi-band compressor on the low end, maybe everything below 120 hertz. I'll make it so that it doesn't cross -3 dB, and I'll have, you know, relatively fast attack and slower release, maybe 300. And that keeps it so that my subs never peak too crazy and distort the master. It's a really, really easy way to make sure things are staying in check. So let's get back to this here. I'm going to use some multi-band dynamics on this loop here. And there's a cool new way to work with the sampler in Ableton. Ableton just released this thing called SQ Sequencer, which is free for anybody with Live Suite, I believe. And what it allows you to do is you can change the velocity in a sequencer, or any sort of sequencer that allows you to map velocity. You can do this with. But inside here in Ableton, inside the MIDI tab, you can make it so that the velocity affects the sample offset of the sample, whatever sample you load. So you can get some really quick ideas really fast using this method. But like, let's say I want some more low end information here. I'll do my trick here, -3 dB. Maybe for this, it's like more boom bappy, doesn't need that much sub. We'll go -8. Bring this down. And we can just boost into this now. Now, none of the low end is ever going to pass -16. I mean, I guess it will a little bit, but for the most part, it's going to stick around this area. And for cleanliness sake, like I said before, to turn this into a gate, anything that's not hitting around that area, let's just pull it out. So now we've got some nice low end here. And before, you basically couldn't even hear this the bass at all if you listen to the before. It's almost like it didn't exist. We throw this on there. It's like somehow a bass guitar is hidden under the sample. All right, so now I want more energy here. So I'll probably I'll put this super hard, and I'll boost into it again. Do some upwards. Maybe make this quicker. So before, it's like a completely different sound, completely different sample almost. We can retain some of the dynamics in the high end if we push that release up a little bit. Now with the drums. Let's work on the mids here. And like I said earlier, we can use this amount knob to really dial it back. So it's like, okay, it sounds good soloed, but maybe together it sounds a little too squashed. Drop it at 60. And the cool thing, because I have this set up in the SQ sequencer, I can just randomize this velocity here, and you get a completely different loop. Crazy stuff.